Garrison, Julie Coulter, Tim Green, Lou Steadwell, and John Williams. The committee put together a great slate of candidates. So we've got Ron Lorenzen, who is standing for junior warden. Annie Elliott is running for election for the second term. And then Jean Baptiste, Brian Bolton, Jessica Church, Nellie Fagan, and Mary Mervin are going to run for their first term. And that concludes the nominating report.
Thank you, Jenny. Don't go far. We have a wonderful slate of candidates, and questionnaires have been available for a couple of weeks, and we had a wonderful candidates forum last week. Thank you, nominating committee, for your work and presenting such a wonderful slate. As stipulated by our parish bylaws, at this time, we now open the floor for any additional nominations to stand for election to the vestry. A nomination may be made by any member of St. Margaret's, but must be duly seconded, and the candidate named must have agreed to accept the nomination before they will be added to the ballot. Please indicate if you would like to nominate someone by raising your hand, and when called upon, come to the microphone. Or if you are joining by Zoom, please use the raise hand feature to be called upon to speak. Are there any nominations from the floor at this time? I'm not seeing any hands. Are there any virtual hands raised in the Zoom room?
None.
Not hearing any. So I would now invite a motion to place in nominations the nominees presented by the nominating committee. How about we say that Paige moved that, and a second can come from Steve Carson. Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you so much. The nominations are now closed. Now, welcome back, Jenny, to explain voting.
Hello, everyone, again. So the way this is going to work is later today, you will receive an email from a election buddy system, which is going to have a URL that's unique to you. So it's going to ask you to make your selections, confirm your selections, and then you could submit the ballot. So those emails will be sent later today. So like if you don't get an email by tomorrow, please let me know or Tim Durr know. I think that we're going to put these, we have an email. But just email me and let me know. We also have paper ballots if someone prefers to vote with a paper ballot. So the voting is going to remain open through Tuesday at 5 p.m. So you'll have a couple of days to vote. Does anyone have any questions about that?
I have not seen it. In previous years, sometimes it was always allowed for even the number of people that were slated. So is that permissible?
Yes.
Yeah, you can vote for 2 or more. Any other questions I cannot answer? Richard for answers. Okay.
I'll use that one. Now move on to ministry reports. This is my chance to speak to you as rector. What's that? I speak to you today in the 6th year of my pastorate. Yeah, 6 years. And we now begin our 5th year of our strategic vision, with the vestry having reapproved that vision in 2021 from a plan that was begun and interrupted by COVID back in 2020. This is now the final 2-year stretch of a journey we began together in which we discerned and decided to focus our collective energies in a very particular way. But before I talk about the work, I want to begin by talking about all of you, the people of St. Margaret's, and by giving thanks to God for each of you. It is a privilege to be with you each week in worship, and to sit where I sit up there and to be able to see all of you in worship. And I have a monitor, thank you, Miranda, to be able to see those little Brady Bunch heads are on screen online. It's a privilege to be present each month in so many different meetings, our governance bodies, ministry, conversations, to be in classes where we learn mutually about how God is working in our lives, and to meet every single week with so many different people who have different things on their hearts and minds with different concerns. We are a highly engaged parish. What I mean by engaged is we do more than just show up and worship. In fact, a record 64% of us were active last year beyond just worship. You are a hugely generous, compassionate, and impressively capable bunch of people. You've given so much of yourselves to make our mission what it is, and it truly wouldn't be. Priests come and go, but you are what makes St. Margaret's what it is. And I hear from you over and over again that it's because what you have received from this community that you give back so much to make it continue. And I want to let you in on something. The word is getting around. St. Margaret's is becoming known as a leader. It was seen as a leader, but particularly is now really being known as a leader in the diocese. It is so fun for Reverend Diana and I to tell our friends and colleagues what we're up to, what we are up to together, how strong our lay leadership is, how engaged we are in growing together, how we're willing to try new things, how we're willing to get it wrong sometimes, and we have fun together. And that's sadly not true in every context. Let me also begin by thanking publicly the most wonderfully talented and dedicated staff that any church could hope for. And so if you're here, please stand to be acknowledged. Dr. Timothy Doerr, the Reverend Diana Gustafson, Deacon Francisco Serrano, our sexton Damon Clements, volunteer exemplar John Bello, is he here today? Our accountant, Nibby Winston, please pray for her. She continues to mourn the death of her sister. Bill and Allie, our paid singers, probably with him. New to our lives, seminarian Jen Mariano. And at Charlie's Place, Reggie Cox, John Williams, and Marie Graves. As Paul wrote to the Ephesians, I do not cease to give thanks for them as I remember them in my prayers. The scripture passage that came to me to share with you today is the same one that had come to me to bring to January's vestry meeting. It's a story about Jesus that appears in all 4 versions of the Gospels. And since Dr. Gaffney has chosen this Women's Lectionary Year to focus on Mark, we read his version. It's the well-known story of when Jesus fed the multitudes, 5,000 people. Jesus and the disciples had been on their way to take some time off. They had been very busy and hadn't even had time to eat, it said. So Jesus said, let's go away for a while and rest. But the people who were following Jesus saw where they were going and ran ahead to meet them there. So when Jesus arrived at the would-be retreat destination and saw the crowd that had followed, Mark reports that he had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And so he taught them. That's what they came for. He taught. And by the end of the day, it was dark and the disciples were getting anxious. They suggested that Jesus dismiss the people so that maybe they could go away and find a place to stay, get something to eat. But Jesus answered, you give them something to eat. And all they had were 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus instructed them for everyone to sit down. And taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish and looking up to heaven, Jesus gave thanks to God and broke the bread. And he gave it to the disciples to distribute. And all ate and were filled. And what's more, even 12 basketfuls of fragments were left over at the end. I think when I was growing up, and certainly even until January's vestry meeting, I always read this story as a miracle story. I think I always remember that, in some bad translations, the subtitle is The Multiplication of the Loaves. I've imagined that, this quantity of bread appeared like manna out of heaven, as it did for the Israelites, or that it was like one of those water into wine moments, like at the wedding at Cana. But as we studied this passage at our January vestry meeting, which was a challenging meeting, which had culminated months of challenging work to discern the 2024 operating budget, we came to a different interpretation. The text never speaks of multiplication. It never uses the word miracle. It simply reports the facts, that there was enough food and all ate and were filled. Could it be that they just shared what they had with each other? And that by first giving thanks to God, by being in the presence of literally love incarnate, that what at first appeared to be scarcity ended up being just enough. It is through the lens of this story's teaching that I suggest we embark on this new year of ministry, when we look to Jesus as shepherd who will protect and provide, when we assume the possibility of abundance, even when it looks like scarcity, we will faithfully steward the mission that God has given us, to be a warm place, to grow in our faith in Christ, to care for one another in this diverse and inclusive community. So with that in mind, I'll turn to our strategic vision. Now, I think about this plan a lot, and I know probably not everyone else does, and that's okay. It's my job to think about this plan, to refer to it, to remind us that it exists, and to use it as a spirit-infused barometer to discern what should we focus on. So the four most important words to remember about our plan are all verbs, and they're rendered in the ing gerund form. Inspiring, and then two that we put together because, we always need extra. Educating and equipping, and growing. Inspiring every person to experience the love of God in Christ, educating disciples of Christ and equipping them to put faith in action, growing generosity and neighborliness. These are the hows. These are the actions of how we seek to live out our mission, and how we seek specifically to grow numerically and spiritually. This year, I decided to put together the written report that has been shared by an email link on Friday, and I think we did 45 copies. I see a lot of people here. Thank you for being here. So if you want a printed copy and didn't get one, we can run more off. But invite you to refer to it, and if some of you have had time to read it, I hope it makes you feel more prepared for today, and we'll have Q&A session later. But because you can read the report for yourself, I'm not going to give it all to you, just the Reader's Digest version. It gives me great joy to report that the state of St. Margaret's is vibrant, healthy, and growing. I say that we're growing because you look at the trends in worship attendance, newcomers, sacraments, and engagement. I say we're healthy when you consider our overall vital signs today, including the impact of Charlie's Place and other justice ministries, congregational giving, and the bottom line as compared to what they were 5 or even 10 years ago. But most importantly, we're vibrant because we are driven by a compelling mission and vision that is bigger than ourselves. We want to share the love of God in Christ that we have known for ourselves with each other and with new people. Yes, evangelism. So I want to spend the balance of my time highlighting 2 points of pride regarding the past year and 2 hopes I bring for this new year. The first is related to the number of people who are making sacramental commitments to follow Jesus Christ by being baptized, confirmed, or received. It was really my push that we set the ambitious goal for the 5-year strategic plan to hope to baptize, confirm, or receive 100 people in that 5-year span. It has been my joy to baptize thus far 18 people and to present to the bishop 29 people for confirmation or reception. So we've reached 47% of that goal. And I think there's a slide with breakdown. But why is this a point of pride? It's not really about the metrics. For me, nothing brings me more joy than performing or witnessing these sacraments, except for the joy of preparing people to experience these sacraments. When I see people wrestle with their doubts and questions, when I see people vulnerably reveal what they wish were true about their relationship with God, when I see people for the very first time understand something new about Jesus, or when I stand alongside someone who has known Jesus their whole lives but was hurt by another church tradition and now has found a home in ours, my faith is renewed over and over again, every single time. So we might not baptize. It would need to be 26 or 27 each year, this year and next, to reach that 100. We might not get there. But regardless, we're going to try. And when you think about how COVID slowed things down and our capacity for 2 years, it's wonderful that we are trending again upward in this area. The second point of pride is to mention Charlie's Place. 2022, so 2 years ago, was very much a transitional year for Charlie's Place. Many of us who've been around for long enough to remember, it has been through a lot of evolution, a lot of study, a lot of consideration that has involved many, many people in this room. And this past year was the first full year of the fruit born from the discernment work that happened the year prior. So it's the first full calendar year of living into a refocused program model. And it's also the first year that we started tracking new things. So we don't have a lot of historic data because the changes we discerned were we really want to focus on addressing root causes of people experiencing homelessness. We really want to focus on how many are we actually matching with vouchers, how many are moving into permanent housing, most importantly. And we continue to be a space where people can gather to experience community, what our clients, guests tell us is most important to them. But rather hear more from me, I'm going to cede about 5 minutes of my time so you can hear directly from Reggie in a video that he made for us. The sound works. Should we come back to it maybe? Or 1 sec, yes.
First,
try later putting one of our microphones to use laptop.
Margaret. Thank you for your wonderful support.
He shares how well things are going at Charlie's Place, and shares a personal story about a longtime client. Maybe if you can go to the last slide.
I want to thank some other organizations.
And you'll see this beautiful photo of Reggie with Tito Valdez, who's a longtime client that Reggie first met when he came as a client himself, and who, after a very long journey, secured permanent housing in December. So it's just kind of a personal story of a small vignette of all the things that are happening at Charlie's Place, and the message I was to leave you with is to just find a way to be involved this year. And to be part of the magic that is Charlie's Place. So, should I keep going? Yeah. So my last part of this is the two hopes that I have for 2024. They're interrelated because they both deal with financial sustainability. As you'll hear more from Garrison, who's on Zoom today, later on, we will have moved from a few years of operating surpluses to 2 years of operating deficits. And the vestry approved an operating deficit for 2024 that, quite honestly, none of us is comfortable with. To balance the budget, we either have to make painful reductions in expenses, or we have to raise more money. As rector, I have brought all of my energy toward the task of both of these endeavors. With the guidance of each treasurer I've worked with, we've put all the appropriate controls in place to make spending judiciously, and the fat has been trimmed already. And yet, as the vestry has wrestled with in particular, our biggest increase in expenses over the past 5 years is personnel. While we still have a 125-year-old building that always has something going on with it. So the message that I'm leaving you with today is indeed a bit of a paradox. On the one hand, we want you to see, and we want to celebrate together, all of the vital signs in the written report that point to growth and health. Things are looking very positive. On the other hand, in the past 2 years, as giving has trended downward, expenses have only gone up, hence the deficit. There's a slide on the pledge trends. So when you look at the 5-year story, it's great, 13% increase. When you look at the last few years in particular, it has gone slightly down. We have brought a lot of focus to how we do financial stewardship. We have at least 2 stewardship chairs passed in the room. The trajectory is inspiring. And to inspire congregational giving, we will continue to do all we know that are best practices to earn your support and foster financial stewardship as a part of our Christian discipleship. I myself increased my own pledge for 2024 to a full tithe. It's the first time I've been able to do it. It's a goal I've been working on throughout my tenure. And despite a tithe feeling more sacrificial in light of now being the parent of 2, I discern that if I want to model financial generosity for you and for my sons, then I need to practice what I preach. So if you too find that you might have more capacity to give to church, then I very much encourage you to do so. Which brings me to a final word about my belief that as a church, we're also going to have to look at that other biggest expense we incur, which are all related to maintaining this beautiful space and the space to the back. By some just quick back of the envelope math, not official at all, just to kind of give you the impact of it, we have at least spent over the past 10 years more than $1.2 million on our facilities. That's not annual maintenance, that's just like the extra capital expenses. Canon Andrew Walters, the canon to the ordinary, presented a very compelling report to convention last week. It had been his charge from the year prior to do a year-long worth of research with the goal of finding ways to address these issues. We are not alone. Nearly every parish in the diocese is facing the same situation. Canon Walters said the following: "The truth is, friends, our sacred buildings, despite their history, beauty, and architectural significance, are a financial liability. Plumbing pipes clog and leak, HVAC systems break down at the worst of all possible times, and roofs need to be replaced, all of which consume financial resources. That's why the diocese's own strategic plan includes the consequential goal of developing a stewardship strategy for church facilities so that parishes are not consumed by building concerns." Canon Andrew reported the results of his year-long study of how to achieve this goal. As with all issues affecting congregational health and vitality, there are no easy answers, he said. There are, however, ways to transform a church building from a liability to an asset, when vestries and congregational leaders are willing to make bold, faith-filled decisions. He reported 3 ways to turn a building from a liability to an asset. 1, increasing rental income. 2, redeveloping church property. 3, selling a building or property. All 3 strategies involve hard work. Canon Andrew reported that the diocese and diocesan staff can help provide resources and support all 3 of these approaches. St. Margaret's also set a goal 5 years ago as part of our strategic plan to, quote, "explore ways to maximize use of our real estate that align with our purpose and vision." That space to the back that connects through the little stairs to what we call the townhouse
right? We've had vacant office space for years. There's at least, by Tracy's estimation, $40,000 to $50,000 of deferred maintenance sitting, waiting to be done. The outgoing vestry has already been convicted of this needing to be a priority for 2024. And so at our senior warden's direction, I've already begun conversations with Andrew and with a partner that he had identified as a potential path for exploring redevelopment. But we have experts in this room and within the congregation. A group of lay leaders back in 2019, 2020 had worked on this very thing, and we were moving in a particular direction, and COVID ended it all. So I've reached out to all of those people already. They have all said yes to coming back, to resurrecting the committee. And as we heard last week in our candidates forum, a number of incoming vestry members have expertise and perspective to offer. I hasten to add that we might massively fail at this, and that there is risk involved. But I come back to loaves and fish, and I imagine what an impact it would have on our mission to turn our beloved buildings into assets. Imagine if, like Jesus, we looked to heaven first, blessed and broke what we had, and offered it back to the community so that all could be fed. I want to pledge to you again this year my commitment to doing all within my ability to pursue such an endeavor. With God's help, we must try. Thank you all for the privilege of serving as your rector. I'm so, so grateful. Thank you. We're going to try holding this mic to Amy's laptop so you can hear Reggie.
Okay. We've got audio, just need to amplify it. 1 second.
I just want to come to you today and talk to you about a few things and stay in Charlie's place and how we're doing. And to thank a few people and organizations and do a little brief personal interest story. First, I want to say thank you to St. Margaret's. Thank you for your wonderful support. Without you, there would be no Charlie's Place. So we thank you, thank you, thank you. In addition to organizations like Miriam's Kitchen, who's been our biggest supporter and collaborator, I want to thank some other organizations, such as Pathways to Housing. One person in particular, Carol Perry, she Jenny posts up down Connecticut Avenue, so we collaborate a great deal working with clients. Nydia of Community Connections, she helps me out with families. So I want to thank those people. They've been a big part of our Charlie's Place program as well. So also, I don't want to forget the Foundry Church. They've been very supportive of us and helping us do clothing drives, coats for the winter, socks, underwear. So thank you to the Foundry Church. Also, new things on the horizon. This year, going into the new year, we're going to have a few other organizations coming in to speak with our guests. National Coalition for the Homeless, they'll be coming in to talk to our guests about maintaining their voters' right despite being unhoused. We have homeless veterans organizations that will be coming in and talk with our vets and helping them connect with services and a few others. So I just want to let everyone know that there are a few new things on the horizon. Thank you for those who are running our groups, such as our Bible study class and our women's group. Thank you so much to those supporters and those who attend those groups. So we want to say that we appreciate you as well. Also, it's not just about the beautiful stats. I'm so grateful for such a beautiful stats. I want to thank those who did the beautiful stats, graphics of our stats. It's beautiful. So it looks wonderful. Also, I want to bring you some personal interest stories because there are some wonderful stories at Charlie's Place. And there's one in particular I like to mention. His name is Tito Valdez. I mention him personally because he is someone that I met when I first came to the doors of Charlie's Place. When I first came in, I met Tito. He's one of the warm, positive person. And, you know, despite his ups and downs of being homeless, he was always positive and upbeat and very supportive of our program. So it absolutely delights me that Tito has finally moved into his own housing. He has his own apartment. He moved in December, this past December, a beautiful apartment in Fort Totten. And I want to thank Renetta and Miriam's Kitchen for being very supportive and making that happen. During the pandemic, Miriam's Kitchen made sure Tito was off the street by placing him in a hotel. And of course, many of those who were placed in the hotel, they matched the vouchers. So finally, and I've known Tito for 10 years, and he's finally moved to his own place, and he's just exuberant, very excited. And it was nice to have him come back and ask for groceries. So those who want to find ways to support us, our pantry is a big ask. So please continue to do little food drives for our pantry, keep it nice and stocked, because that's one of the things that our guests come back for, pantry items. So please help us keep that stocked. And I want to thank you again. Thank you, Reverend Richard, and all those members of the board and the rest of St. Margaret's for your wonderful ongoing support. And we want our Charlie's Place to improve. We always want to remain relevant in this community and in any way we can. Thank you. Ask for groceries.
Hello, everyone. All right. Wow. Well, this time last year, I was sitting in the pews, and my predecessor, Mike Armstrong, was up here speaking and presenting wonderfully, and I'm looking at him and I'm listening. I'm thinking, you know, this is really good. I should probably be taking notes since this is going to be me in a year. And here I am, somewhat noteless, but I'm kidding, of course. There's so much going on at St. Margaret's that I have ample stories to share, and just want to start by saying how grateful and what an honor it is to be here before you. I want to start by thanking also folks who have made sort of this journey possible, Richard in particular for asking me to consider being a senior warden, and then the rest of the congregation for validating that. Thank you. You know, throughout the year, I've had several of you actually come up to me privately and sort of encouraging me. Your stories, your anecdotes, and your experiences of your time at St. Margaret's have really fueled me, and so I want to say how much I appreciate that. And then finally, to my fellow vestry members, I mean, one of the perks of being the senior warden is you get to stand up here and talk about everything that everyone else has done. And, you know, you get to really brag on sort of the hard work of the vestry. And so I just know that when I stand here before you, it's really because I've got an incredible vestry who was so instrumental in the success this year. And so I thought about what I wanted to speak to you all today. First, in addition to speaking about the vestry's work, I wanted to use the 3-2-1 method. Just share with you about 3 things that, out of the many, are points of pride. And then share 2 things with you, out of the many things, that are top of mind for me as we think about going into next year. And then close with one thing that gives me hope, right? That's going to fuel me and our work together in the future. So first we'll start with the retreat that happened in January. As you know, every year the vestry, once the vestry is formed and elected, we meet. We welcomed 3 couple of new members. We were grateful to have folks like Carolyn join us, and Colleen, and Chris. And we also had a new treasurer, Garrison, who started his first order of business by making sure that we were going through the operating budget for the year. We were able to work with Mildred Reyes from the diocese at our retreat, and we spent a lot of time discerning what are the different priorities that we can wrestle with throughout the year. There's so many things that we could be doing, and this actually brings me to one of my first points of pride, which is that, we actually did the work. When you have so many competing priorities and you've got this amazing strategic vision and you want to be able to do it all, and we are a working vestry. And so, when you want to do everything, to be able to stay committed to your 3 priorities and execute them is no small feat. We had the Faith and Action Committee, we had the Growing Neighborliness, and we also had welcoming newcomers. And we worked throughout the year with members of the vestry, working with lay leaders and members of the clergy and staff to make sure that we were hitting our goals and our objectives in each of those categories. So much so that at some point in the year, folks decided to merge 2 of those committees into one, and where we could actually spread our time and efforts and really make some really meaningful efforts. And so one thing I wanted to mention is how grateful I was to see, particularly with the newcomers committee, to be able to have a literal welcome table. I think was something that was really, really impressive. In fact, I sat out there today and got a chance to meet one of the newcomers. And so not only having an actual welcome table that lives into our values of being a welcoming community, but also the ministry fair. Many of you may have remembered that we, for the first time, brought an exciting fair that allowed not just returning folks, but also newcomers to learn about all of the different and wonderful ministries, that we had. In terms of the Faith and Action and Neighborhood Committee, it was really a point of pride to be able to know that we lived into our values of the outreach ministry, and we're able to use the funds that are allotted to us to then do good work in the community. I think we have a goal of $250,000, I think we're supposed to, to try and give away, and we are on our way in doing that. And so it's really good to know that we are committed to and holding ourselves accountable to making sure that we are sending that money out into the community to those who need it. And so the other thing I wanted to mention in terms of being a welcoming community is that, and looking back over my notes for this year, our bishop came. And we were able to put on a wonderful reception and welcome for our bishop, while also welcoming and opening our doors through the rummage sale to members of the community. And I think, one of the beautiful things that I love about this place is our ability to welcome, everyone, regardless of their status, regardless of who they are. And so a point of pride for me was to be able to have the bishop spend real one-on-one time with the vestry. After the service, after the coffee hour, she met with us and asked us to really think about what are our priorities for the year, and to really hear from her directly was really sort of inspiring for us and helped to propel us forward. The rummage sale. I committed to being as involved as I could in the rummage sale because I knew how important it was to this community. And I was able to observe and get my hands dirty and work with all of you and just see how this amazing community event comes to life. And you couldn't get any more in the neighborhood than having our rummage sale. And to be able to, for the second year in a row, after a hiatus, to put it on and raise $25,000 is no small feat. And I'm really hoping that next year, this year, with the rummage sale, that we're able to continue reminding ourselves of the value add that this has for the community. Yes, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of preparation, but it's one of really the only ways that we're able to then showcase who we are as a community to the wider DC community. And so I just want to thank those of you who really put a lot of work and effort into making that possible. And now I want to shift to 2 items that are sort of top of mind for me that I am going to be intentionally working with our new vestry on. And the first is around a growth versus scarcity mindset. Here's the conundrum, the way that I see it, right? Our vital signs are working. We're doing good work. You heard Richard talk about all of the positives that are happening here. It's exciting. Our name is being known. We've got newcomers coming in the door. It's really vibrant. And yet, we are constantly faced with this challenge of building a budget that allows us to continue to do the good work that we're doing while balancing this budget. And it's something that we are definitely aware of and struggling with, and it's something that we will work on together as a vestry, in this coming year. The budgets are tight. We have options to cut costs or increase revenue. But I want us to think about what it would look like to, instead of moving from a place of cutting and reducing, what would it look like to really step out in faith and have a growth mindset where we are motivated and excited, where we're taking and we're leveraging all of the good things that are happening, even if it's not immediate, and we're taking that and stepping out on faith together to try and think about other ways to grow and enhance. How are we, diversifying our revenue streams? Richard talked about the building, for example, but there are other ways. Are there any other ways that we can work together to begin to move from a place of abundance? And that's something that, we don't have the answer to right now, but it's something I'm going to be wrestling with and praying with and working with our vestry so that we are, thinking about moving the mission forward from that place of abundance. The second thing that's top of mind for me is our continued investment in our clergy and in our staff. I think back to all of the support and the care that I've personally seen each of you extend to clergy and staff when they're sick, when they have things come up in their lives, when we're celebrating. We are a community that gives back, and we're a community that cares for our people. And there's been so much incredible support, folks at conferences, their care packages, and on and on. And we celebrate our clergy and staff achievements. And so one thing in particular I wanted to bring to you, if you're not aware of, is that our very own Richard has decided to take another step in his professional development and growth. He has applied to and has been accepted into Fordham University. They have an online program for an advanced certificate in spiritual direction. What this affords St. Margaret is to have a rector who is enrolled in an online program, learning about spiritual direction, and then using that, blending both his knowledge and experience with being a pastor, incorporating spiritual direction to helping each of us grow. Now, we did not, in the budget, we were not able to put in revenue in funds so that he is able to offset the cost of that, right? Like he's got scholarships and there are many other opportunities in which he can attend Fordham's program, but we were not able to do that. And my hope is that as we move forward, that when we come to you to ask you to consider thinking about ways in which you can help the professional development of not just Richard, but all of our clergy and our staff. I think it's really important that as part of growth, that we are thinking about ways in which we can do that. I think it's really exciting, and I'm going to hear more as we move forward. We're going to work on a path to sustainability. And I think we're really going to be wrestling with what does it mean and what should we be investing in to support? These are big questions and they're not easy. But I think one of the things that brings me hope and what I'm looking forward to is working with each of you. We've got a new vestry. I think we have 7, we will soon have 7 folks that are going to be joining us. That's an entirely new vestry, and it's going to be exciting. But it's not just the vestry leadership, it's really the lay leadership. We're really going to be working with you and really looking around this room and seeing how each of you serve in some critical way. The only way that I can see a path forward is if both the vestry and the lay leadership work together. Your ideas, your expertise, your time, and your resources. I think we're going to be able to move forward with God's help. And I'm really looking forward to discussing more during the Q&A period. I hope we have some time for that. But right now, I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for your faith and trust in me. And I'm going to invite Garrison, who I think is online, to come forward and provide our treasurer's report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Giselle. And if somehow someone could let me know that you can hear me in the parish, that would be great.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, first, I just want to say how regretful I am that I can't be there in person with you today. I was very much looking forward to this, but I had a work event that has brought me to Phoenix this weekend. So I am grateful to be able to join with you online. I also want to echo Richard's sentiment and give thanks to Nibby Winston, who's our accountant. She obviously does a lot of work in the background to support St. Margaret's, and she has been dealing with the death of her sister, so a very challenging time for her and for her family. And even still, she's managed to work with me in order to get the materials pulled together for today to present to you all. So just want to give special thanks to Nibby and to ask for your continued prayers for her and her family. I want to cover today, we'll review our 2023 financial performance as has been custom as part of the annual meeting. But I also want to continue building on the sentiments that Richard and Giselle have shared and give you a picture of what the last 5 years have looked like, and for the first time actually share with you the budget that's been approved for 2024. I hope that this will be a new norm for us as part of the annual meeting so that we have true visibility, not just into what happened last year, but what the future looks like for us. And so I'm excited to start that today. And then finally, we'll look at Charlie's Place financial performance and end with a look at our investment accounts. So if we can go to the next slide. So this first slide shows our 2023 financial performance. On the right, you have a graph that shows our income by source as well as our expense by source. So our total income for 2023 was $611,000, and our total expenses were $639,000, which left us with a $28,000, nearly $29,000 operating deficit. Because in years past, we have not shared our budget for the future year, this may come as a surprise to you, but we actually budgeted and anticipated a $31,000 deficit. So we have ended more favorably to budget than we anticipated. There were sort of two main drivers here. One is our gross income came in below where we expected. You can see the comparison to budget there on the left. Income came in $8,000 unfavorable to budget, meaning we brought in less income than we anticipated. But thanks to Richard and Tim and all of the staff for their cost management practices, we were able to see $11,000 in savings relative to budget on the expense side, which offset that decrease in income relative to budget and left us in a favorable position. If we can go to the next slide. So here are the financial trends that we've seen since 2019. So year before the pandemic, we have run operating surpluses 2019 through 2021. In 2020, that was in part due to our reduced costs from operating online and having some of our programs on hold during that time. But also we grew giving as part of this community during that time. But we've started to see the tides shift a little bit here. One of the realities of the world that we're living in today, and all of us are feeling this personally, is inflation is impacting those of us in our personal lives, but it's also impacting the church. The other reality is that we want to continue to support our staff, and that means cost of living adjustments every year. That means that the price of health insurance goes up. I know personally, my car insurance in DC has gone up significantly, and the church is facing those same pressures. So we have liability insurance for the church. We have workers' comp insurance. Those things are continuing to push up, while we've seen income stagnate and even begin to erode in 2023. So costs are growing at a reasonable pace. In 2024, we're projecting a 2.5% cost increase, but we're struggling to keep that income pacing with that. So that's where we're seeing some of the trends that Richard and Giselle have spoken to. They alluded to this, but the vestry finalized a budget for 2024 with a $53,000 deficit. And I cannot emphasize enough how much went into these discussions. We had 3 formal meetings of the vestry to discuss the budget. One of those was an executive session. Richard and I met with Andrew from the diocese to present him our budget draft and get feedback from him on our opportunities. I've had countless conversations, sidebars with other members of the vestry, prior treasurers, and really, I want to bring you all into that conversation and let you know that we considered some very difficult and painful decisions to consider how to right size this for the future. I think where ultimately the vestry landed was that we feel this good energy that Richard's reported, that everything is moving and growing and we are a really healthy church, and that we want to continue to support that growth and development and give ourselves a little bit more time to figure this out. So the good news is when you look across 2019 to 2024, even with our projected deficit in 2024, we're still at an operating surplus over those years. But this is now something that we see as a trend that needs to course correct. So we're looking at ways to diversify revenue streams, looking at our assets, and how we can improve things on that front. I've also included a waterfall here to show you what's driving that 2.5% increase from 2023 to 2024. It may be cut off at the bottom what the categories are, but that $12,000 increase on the left, that is personnel and cost of living. That's a full year of 2 musicians that we have brought on, and then cost of living adjustments for our staff. We have tightened some things and rolled back some increases to benefits that we had the capacity to approve last year, but didn't this year. So we are really looking at every place that we can tighten in order to make sure that we're being good stewards. Finally, I want to sort of take a moment to share personally what this has meant for me. I've mentioned that we had a series of very painful budget discussions, but there was a lot of love in the room and a lot of care for this community. But I mean it when I say that I personally, as your treasurer, carried this burden on my back. If you talk with my partner, my friends and my family, they heard a lot about this from me. If you talk with my close friends at St. Margaret's, Julie Poulter, Annie, Linda, Heaney, they know how much this weighed on me. And I, throughout the process, was really praying for the Holy Spirit to be present in our vestry conversations and be present for me. And to my surprise, what I heard from God during that time in prayer was that he was calling me to do more. And as much as I had already discerned and decided to increase my pledge to St. Margaret's in 2024, but I was hearing God's call to do more. And I told myself the things I always tell myself, which is that I'm young, I'm still building. I already increased my pledge. I can always give more next year. I give so much of my time to St. Margaret's, but what I kept hearing was not to push us to do less as a community, but for me to do more. And then thankfully, God sent me Patty Nickerson, who shared a very thoughtful email to the vestry about how she would increase her pledge in response to the deficit projection. And to support the Life of St. Margaret's, which she has engaged in and feels that she benefits so much from. And so with that, I also decided to further increase my pledge for 2024. And so I hope that that I've made you proud as your treasurer. I know that it's difficult to see some of the hard news, but I'm following God's call for myself and for our community, and I thank you for walking with me through it. So with that, I'll go to the next slide where we can talk about Charlie's Place. So Charlie's Place had a really great year in terms of income. We had been experiencing some pressures on the grant side that we saw a lot of success back in grants again this year. We had $201,000 in income for Charlie's Place. On the expense side, $214,000. So we came in a little bit unfavorable to budget here. Largely, there was some added program expense at the start of the year. When I alerted Reggie to this, he was very quick to respond and maintain throughout the year. But we got a little ahead of our skis early on, and it was hard to catch up. But fortunately, there's really strong support on the grant side and a lot of good stuff going on at Charlie's Place. So we feel very strongly about the financial health of Charlie's Place after some of the changes that we've been able to make. Finally, I will end on the next slide with our investment accounts. And I know that as we look at sort of the investment accounts, we have to balance that with sort of the stresses that we're feeling on the operating side. The good news is that after a bad year for the market last year, that significantly depleted our investment accounts, which are our reserves, the market has bounced back in 2023. And so we're seeing those accounts return to where they were above in 2021. I know that as a treasurer, this gives me comfort that we have this amount of reserves. But those of you who were around and participated when the boiler went out, and that was a $500,000 expense, know how quickly this money can be spent if there's a large item that needs to be addressed. So I'm very grateful for the security that this provides us, but encouraged too that we need to continue to be good stewards of our operating budget. The last thing I'll mention is that we did establish an endowment account in 2023. That account ended the year with an $11,000 balance. There's since been a large contribution to that, so we're growing the endowment, which we hope, in the future will allow us to continue to diversify revenue streams and have a little bit more stability on the income side. Finally, I've said finally about 4 times, but I need to also mention, and the Racial Justice Task Force will touch on the work that they've done around minority vendors. Thankfully, thanks to Nibby and to Tim, we are now actually able to track our spend, what share of our expenses are with minority vendors, employees. And this year we ended with 24% of expenses spent with racial minority groups and employees. This is down a little bit from where we were in 2023. We ended 2023 at 27%. So I know that it is something that we continue to hold ourselves accountable to, and hopefully we'll see improvement on in the future. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, Garrison. We're now turning to a report from the Racial Justice Task Force. If anyone needs to stretch, please do stretch in place while Annika and/or Jackie get on microphone.
Stretch is always good. Can you hear me in the service?
Yes.
Great. Let me know when folks are done moving.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Annika Middick, and I am one of your co-chairs of the Racial Justice Task Force, along with Jackie Mackey, who is joining me remotely. We are going to go through just a little bit about who and what we are, for those who may not have heard us from our inception, talking about what we're doing, and then wanted to share with you some of our core areas of focus for this coming year. So if you wouldn't mind, please, tech team, wonderful folks in the back, advancing to the next slide, that would be much appreciated. So the Racial Justice Task Force was started after the first round of Sacred Ground. So as a parish, there was a small group that was initially being trained to be facilitators, and then we offered the first round of it. And so after that, we felt moved to action. We knew that there was so much more that was needed beyond just our own education, and we felt empowered to move forward with the support of clergy. And so if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide, please. We started to meet about 18 months ago. What we wanted to do in our vision is to build and support the beloved community here of reconcilers, justice makers, and healers. Our goal is really just to pursue God's dream of racial justice. One of the things that we've learned in Sacred Ground and just in our ongoing education and unlearning of things is that, especially from the lens of the church, that there is so much more that we can be doing and that we are being challenged to do. And so we are seeking that harmony locally, nationally, and internationally. If you could go to the next slide, please. Covers a little bit about how we get into that. So we are focused on action within the Racial Justice Task Force. And so some of the things that you will see definitely include learning and education, because that needs to be ongoing. But a lot of this is coming from the desire to actually do things. So we are focused really on being able to prioritize, carry out, evaluate, and communicate with you all, the congregation. So this is one of those efforts. We also provide on occasion some written updates and that type of thing, but all of this is really just stemming from our alignment with the Episcopal Church commitment to becoming beloved community. So if you have any questions on the Racial Justice Task Force, Sacred Ground, or if you're considering joining 3.0 and you want to know a little bit more about kind of the outcome of some of these things, we are more than happy to discuss this with you, but just wanted to kind of reorient ourselves to the Racial Justice Task Force, who we are and why we exist. So if you could please advance to the next slide. Some of the things that we focused on last year in our first year of gathering is we continue to meet monthly. Just given the nature of things, it's been fully remote, which has been such a blessing to be able to join that way. But out of those meetings, then we've been providing some of those periodic updates just to make sure that everybody is aware of what we are doing. We also helped with the Sacred Ground Completers Reunion call. So after 2.0 completed, which was one of our goals for last year, was to offer Sacred Ground again. We then all gathered together to be able to discuss, as completers of the course in various times, what God was calling us to and where we felt we needed to grow and what our next steps were. As part of that, we launched a WhatsApp group where we share resources, activities, ways to get involved and continue to learn and educate ourselves. And then we have also, as I mentioned, supported the Sacred Ground 2.0 anti-racism class as well. On the next slide, we'll get into a few more details there. Last year, we also supported the forum on spirituals and using that as part of our worship practice. And we had the delight of having Dr. Elaine Gunther be able to join us and help us reframe our understanding of spirituals and the importance of them in our worship. We also supported the forum on Black music with Dr. Allison Crockett last year as well, which was another just fantastic understanding of a little bit more of the use of Black music and spirituals within worship. Then we have continued to track and encourage those who are continuing the work of the Parish Racial History Project. If you aren't familiar with that, it is looking at our origination of St. Margaret's as a parish, and the funding and the founding members, and the role that racial injustice played in even the starting of St. Margaret's, and continuing into the lived history with much more recent interviews. And so there have been a faithful few who have been doing some great work there. So just so grateful for John McCall in particular for conducting a lot of interviews. So more to come on that. But we have been supporting those efforts. Then we have conducted a training. So to back up here, one of the wonderful things that we were able to pass in 2023 was the Supplier Diversity Program. It was voted in by the vestry at the very end of 2022, so it really came about in 2023. But what we did after that is we provided training then for the church staff, for all of the various committees and ministries. But just to remind ourselves of what that is, it is the goal to truly put our money where our mouth is. And so if we say that we want to support minority businesses and ensure that we are not perpetuating racial injustice with where we are putting our finances, both as an institution and individually, then we need to take steps in order to be intentional with how we are choosing vendors. So as part of this, with each new vendor or opportunity to provide a new service to the church, the requirement is that as they were looking at vendors, that there are at least 2 minority vendors, whether they are local or internet, beyond just the DMV area, for every 3 vendors that there are. So even if the choice is not necessarily a minority vendor, that there is still the intentionality of seeking that out and making sure that we are including all voices and opportunities, so that we can then ideally be working with those vendors. So as Garrison was able to provide that summary, it's something that we are now tracking with our church finances, and we are looking to continue to grow that. So if you have any thoughts or questions on that, we're more than happy to address that. But going to the next slide then, if you please. We've then been tracking the progress of this year over year. At different points, different committees have had to make decisions on vendors great and small. And so as we are looking to continue to increase that number and that percentage to intentionally be investing in the communities around us, we are hoping to see some of those numbers grow. As the Racial Justice Task Force, we together read a book called Reparations, A Plan for Churches. One of the things that there had just been ongoing discussions around, even within the diocese, was around reparations. And so as a group, we worked through the book with a lot of discussions, May through November, as we met monthly just to be able to discern what our next steps might be as a task force and then as a parish as well. And so looking ahead and what Jackie is going to cover, a lot of our 2024, both short-term and long-term goals are really centering around the thought of reconciliation and the potential of what reparations could look for us. We have also launched Prayers of the People, which you may have even heard today during service. And so at least monthly, our goal is to be able to share something that is educating and also highlighting the work of non-white communities and amazing people, and saying their names and continuing to learn from their examples and being able to share some of that as part of our worship practice as well. As mentioned, we had the ministries fair where folks could learn a little bit more about this. And then we have worked on a retreat that really helped discern where we're going in 2024. So it has been a busy 18 months or so, if you will, but one that has been extremely fruitful, and we are extremely grateful. So next slide is just the summary of our ongoing efforts. We have taken the input of Sacred Ground 1.0 and 2.0 folks as we continue to meet, and then met with the rector, assistant rector, and then the wardens to be able to really determine what our next steps should be. There is so much work to do, and so we didn't want to get lost in the enormity of that. We wanted to make sure that what we were doing was actionable and measurable. So I will hand it over to my co-chair, Jackie, to go through what we're focusing on in this next year.
Thank you, Annika. Move to the next slide, please. My name is Jackie Mackey, and I've had the honor of co-chairing the Racial Justice Task Force since it started in the summer of 2022, co-chairing with Annika. And as she is cycling off the co-chair position, I just want to thank her for her sense of compassion and organization and her fervent commitment to all the work that we are doing. As Annika implied, we are not a ministry in a column by ourselves. We are a catalyst and an encourager and a supporter of racial justice initiatives throughout the whole church. So many of the things we list in our accomplishments last year included many other people who aren't officially task force members, but who are staff and clergy and lay leaders in our church. As Annika mentioned, as we look at our history, that will give us a lot of information about how St. Margaret's as a parish fits into the overall picture of race relations in the DMV area and in our nation. And so again, thanks to John McCall and Kathy Connolly and before them, even Farah Elliott, and others who have been working on this project, we hope to complete the racial history of St. Margaret's early this year so we can share it with the congregation and perhaps share beyond our walls with other people so we know what things have happened in our history that we may wish to and need to make amends for. And that's one reason why it's so important that as many of us as possible do complete the Sacred Ground course from the Episcopal Church's anti-racism curriculum, because that really is our map to making this world a more unified and better place for everyone. So we support Reverend Diana's work in convening the next iteration of On Sacred Ground, and John and Meredith for their co-facilitation of it. A wonderful experience. We also want to emphasize other cultures and the values that they bring to our community, both within our congregation and beyond it. And so we will continue, of course, to celebrate the special achievements of people of color in their designated months, if you will. This being Black History Month, and so excited to hear about Jean's presentation coming up in a week or so. But we want to celebrate all year round. And so in our catalyst role, that's something you will see us kind of lurking in the background behind a lot of things happening at St. Margaret's, where we want to encourage and help coordinate different activities and presentations, forums, formation experiences about people of color and cultures of color that may not be common knowledge among many of us folks who are predominantly white. Next slide, please. As part of our work to encourage relationships across racial lines, we know that a lot of good work is being done throughout St. Margaret's staff and lay leadership with Charlie's Place. And that was, I'm so glad we were able to hear Reggie's audio this morning, because that work definitely has the full support of the task force. And we are reaching out to Reggie to find out if there are other ways that the racial justice group, as well as the faith and action group, can work with each other to promote better relationships and learning and action of value with Charlie's Place. And also, thanks to Anamita Betancourt, we have a wonderful opportunity that just came up recently to possibly participate in a medical debt relief reparations program that is gives St. Margaret's as a parish and some of us as individuals an opportunity to help offset the inordinate negative effects of medical debt on communities of color. So we're really looking forward to 2024. I would just like to thank our wonderful pastor, Richard, and Reverend Diana, and all of the people who are participating actively in the task force. Sometimes there's 3 or 4 of us, sometimes there's 12 or 13 of us. And we just want you to know that once you've completed Sacred Ground, if you want to be part of this rebellious little action group, we'd love to have you join us. And also, we hope you'll pray to our Creator and talk with each other about which of you may be called to serve as a new co-chair with me in 2024. I will be on board as co-chair for the rest of this calendar year, and I'm looking for a new partner as Annika transitions into some other activities that are near and dear to her. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you, Jackie. Our last order of business before opening the floor for questions is to thank and recognize departing vestry members. So if they're present, please do stand as you're able so we can thank you. I think Linda Heaney had to leave early. She has served one term and feels that she's ready to move on from vestry service. John Lucas is not here today. Please hold him in prayer as he and his family mourn the death of his father this week. He has completed 2 consecutive terms on the vestry. Annika Middick, who is online, has also completed 2 consecutive terms of the vestry and notably was the first intentionally virtual vestry member elected by the parish after her first term was interrupted by her and Ray's move to North Dakota. Julie Poulter, is she still here? Oh, there she is. Julie Poulter is also completing her 2nd consecutive term on the vestry. Garrison Gordon is completing his 2nd-year term on the vestry. Yes, he will be serving 1 more year as treasurer, as a non-voting vestry member. And finally, Jenny Carson is finishing her 2nd consecutive term as our junior warden. Please join me in thanking them all. There are gifts for each of them en route on behalf of all of us. A curated Rector's Choice book for the departing vestry members. And having consulted some people who know Jenny well, following in our custom of giving a little more of a gift to departing wardens, she will get to enjoy a spa day at Salamander. It's good for both DC or Middleburg. So we hope you can distress from the experiences of your daily teaching, but also from your dedicated work on the vestry. Thank you all. Thank you. So the floor is open for questions. Test, still alive.
Well, no meeting would be complete without a question from me, so thank you for your patience. I very much want to thank this vestry for its discernment of the 2024 operational budget. I can only imagine how difficult a task that might have been to balance the aspirational goal of growth with perhaps the reality of scarcity and a $50,000 deficit. My question is, with respect to using the townhouse as an asset, we know from previous vestries that have spent up to $100,000 in studying that. Does the deficit include any study costs for that potential, which can run into the tens of thousands of dollars?
It does not.
So should those costs be incurred, they would be on top of the $50,000 deficit?
They would. Thank you. Please.
Another budget question. Thank you, Garrison, for that report. And like, I personally feel inspired to increase my pledge. And I'm wondering if, sort of in this fresh moment, if there will be a formal call to ask parishioners to increase their pledge, or are we kind of just relying on folks to have heard this or read a report and make that decision on their own?
I mean, I think that's something that we are discerning. I mean, I don't think we don't have any formal plans to do a call. We still have to, form a stewardship committee and as we move forward for next year. But it is something that we have considered, but there's been no formal plan for that.
To follow up on Jessica's great question, that occurred to me. To me, it's a no-brainer. I'm sort of direct. The other thing that'd be helpful when people are being asked to pledge is to give us a benchmark. Like the budget next year is going to be 60,000. It's going to be 600,000, and we have 114 members. That's per capita 300. Some number. Something to shoot for, because otherwise when I'm pledging, just speaking for myself, I'm shooting in the dark. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if I should do more. And so having a kind of guideline, and I might have missed it, that would be, for me, very helpful. And I would be very much in favor for having a drive. I think we could close this budget deficit because it's $350 per family-ish. So it's not insurmountable, but that's just kind of my naive thinking right now.
Thank you, Mary. I'm hearing that more as a comment than a question, but I really appreciate that, and I've made note.
Thank you. I have a comment and also a question, and I guess I'm going to stand here, and I'm going to probably take more time than I should, but I feel like, so I'm Paige Cottingham Streeter, and like a number of people in this room, I've served on the vestry of St. Margaret's for a number of years. And first, I want to say thank you so much to our rector and our vestry, because you've gotten us to this point. We came through a very challenging time. We're here as a church. I'm also a longtime Episcopalian who has grown up in another church with a very old building. And so I know the challenges of focusing on mission and also property. So first, in terms of the comment, $28,000, it makes me say ouch, but I also want you to know that historically we have had higher deficits. We've had conversations about deficit spending. That's not what we aim to do, what we want to do, but it's not uncommon. And my home church, they just had their annual meeting, and I don't want to tell you what that figure was. So I don't want us to feel as though we're failing. The Episcopal Church is challenged by declining numbers and memberships. But I also say that to say that we do have to think fresh and innovatively. And so I was pleased to hear that you're reaching out to the diocese. In the Diocese of New Jersey, they have provided churches with different guidelines for rental use. And that, in my view, is as important, if not more important, than pledges. We have to pledge, and as a former chair of the Stewardship Committee, I do have thoughts also about, giving people a number, and that's another conversation. But we can't necessarily rely on pledges. We have to think of other things. Some years ago, we've had conversations about selling property, and I was involved in that too. And so the church used to have at least 3 other pieces of property besides our rectory. And what we have left is the townhouse and the rectory. We were advised, don't ever sell the rectory, and I would suspect Richard would agree. I mean, for good reason. It's not only a lovely property, although it has to be maintained, but it also is close to the church, and you want your rector to be in proximity to the church if possible. But I'm also thinking, what is the percentage of our cost? Because I couldn't really see exactly what the figures and the breakdown, but what is the construction or the renovation cost? And maybe separately, and Mike Armstrong and others know we've talked about it, but having a capital campaign that's separate. We have the Susan Blue building fund. And so, because I'm a little bit uncomfortable of thinking we can rely on $300 more from this unit and the pledges, et cetera. If we can figure out where the money is going so we can do the mission work. And then just as another opportunity for funding is maybe our neighborhood and our community. I mean, we have the luxury of being in the city of Washington, D.C., and our neighbors are well aware of what we're doing. And I'll finally say, I didn't hear it specifically, so I want to give a shout out to Francisco for his mustard seed ministry. When we go out and when we are in DuPont Circle, people sitting on the park bench watching us give to the people in need say, what church you with? St. Margaret's. And then some, oh, but of course it would be St. Margaret's. So there's this sense of knowing who we are and what we do. And some people will even give us cash just because they want to be a part of something. So thank you, Helen. Yeah, so I would suggest that we also think about not only rental use and stewardship, but also reaching out to our neighbors and our community. So thank you.
Thank you. That perspective is really, really helpful. Thank you.
And to clarify, the question that I heard was what percentage of the costs, whether you meant operating or otherwise, go to building related? Is that the question? Garrison, are you still there, and could you answer that?
Yes, I can answer that, as long as
We can hear you.
there we go. Okay. I can do some quick math to answer that. One second. So our buildings and grounds expense, operating expense last year was 147,000 of 639,000 in expenses. So it was 23% of our total operating expenses in 2023.
And then in addition to the funds set aside in the operating budget, there's also non-operating expenses that are approved by the vestry as the need is made known by the Buildings and Grounds Committee. That number would be the building expenses and the non-operating expenses section near the end, if you can find that number.
Okay.
Is it facilities?
No, because that's operating.
Let me check before I report this out. I'm not sure.
No problem.
Which line I should be looking at. So.
Jump in when you have it. Other questions?
Real quick, this is more of a comment as well. Thanks very much for calling out Francisco's ministry and those people who walked down the hill with him in snow, rain, and heat. But the other thing I wanted to point out about Charlie's Place that I didn't hear this time that people ought to hear about is the role of Charlie's Place for volunteers. I see guests and staff, but I don't see volunteers. And I think it's important that people know that there are regular cohorts of people in social work programs in local colleges and universities who come here to work. So we're helping them grow. We have people from the neighborhood who join us. One of our parishioners, who's not in the room right now, but said to me, you know, I now know people on the street as I walk around the neighborhoods. So not only are the volunteers a resource, but they're also those that benefit. And as we support Charlie's Place, we also support them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tad, so much.
Mine's a comment too. I felt inspired, Garrison, after you spoke to say that I think the vestry did a wonderful job discerning on this. And I just wanted to offer a vote of confidence. Those are incredibly tough decisions. And I appreciate you sharing that it weighed on you personally. I am so glad you made a decision to go forward with a budget, with a deficit. I absolutely agree. It's a deficit that does not feel insurmountable. I think that we have people in this room with exciting expertise and ideas about how to use space that have wanted to be a part of that thinking in the past, and I have no doubt will be a part of that thinking in the future. And I think we all feel the growth and energy right now. This was not the time to make cuts when we are moving in the right direction in other ways. I just wanted to underscore that that message was delivered really well, and I'm really glad you guys made those choices.
Thank you, Mary Alice.
Well, thank you. I really agree with that. I think there is a lot of energy here. And so on that issue, I want to ask Giselle, well, Richard, all of you, in the report, you talked about the growth and you talked about the energy and the number of people who are engaged. Has the vestry looked at what's working there to drive that growth and what is not working? And could you comment on that?
So the question is, what, in the vital signs, what's working, right, basically? Well, I think it's like top to bottom, just intentionality. Like step one back in 2019, 2020 was to discern together what do we want to focus on and to organize that vision into the document that we use as a guidepost, the strategic vision. You know, one question that Diana and I get from colleagues in other parishes is, why do you think you have so many newcomers? Like, they want to know, like, what's the magic sauce? And in my opinion, there's no one single answer. It's like the cumulative effect of having worked so intentionally over so many years. It's like all the pieces, how they fit together. Key among them is our website. We invested in creating a better website that matches who we aspire to be and appeals to people who can find us the very first time by landing on our website and choosing to come. It's the welcome that you all play a role in providing when they walk through the doors for the first time. The connect card, it's kind of like all of it. And so it has this trickle effect that relates to all the numbers that we celebrate. The value that you find in showing up week by week to participate in worship. The experience that is worth repeating, that people come back for, that results in the number of attendance going up. Similarly, when newcomers come, we try to really welcome them and learn who they are and invite them to take next steps if they feel like staying or discerning whether this is a place they want to stay longer. So it's all of that, and then measuring the missional stuff and the impact. Is that sounding like it's answering your question? So I guess the bottom line is we're very intentional about it, and in fact, a recurring item on the agenda of the vestry that I bring in my report is looking at the vital signs. So there's been a long history of the vestry pretty exclusively paying attention to how our financial performance is going. But before we get there in the agenda, we look at how are we doing missionally in our vital signs every single month we meet. Thank you for the question.
I just wanted to answer Paige's question that we spent an additional $17,000 on building expenses via the building fund, so not through the operating budget.
Thank you, Garrison, for that.
Hi.
Hi, Daniel.
I've only been at St. Margaret's a year, so I'm quite new, so I'm learning a lot, but I do appreciate how dedicated everyone is, and I love that we're facing a challenge, but the community is, no one's mad, it's a communal problem. So I think I appreciate that. I also want to offer an apology. Garrison asked me weeks ago to make my pledge, and I didn't. So the deficit will go down a small amount for what a lower middle class nonprofit DCer makes. So my pledge will come, and that'll help maybe 2%. So there you go. I'm a little curious about the average Sunday attendance. I mean, we've increased 7% since last year. That's exciting. We had 91 newcomers. I'm curious. I should know this as part of the newcomer committee, but I'm curious about our retention of newcomers And also, if those newcomers are helping subsidize possibly a higher average Sunday attendance, but a newcomer who stays 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks is probably not going to be a giver. Our trend is up in average Sunday attendance, but with this deficit problem, that could be whole. So I'm curious just about retention of newcomers.
That's a great question that I wish I had ready statistics to quote to you so I can speak anecdotally. And I think we do have a means to getting to the actual metrical answers to the questions about, okay, so 91 newcomers, which is simply a measurement of how many actual people did we identify at least that it was their first time worshiping, either by a Connect card or because they gave in a way that we knew who they were and it was the first time they were giving by plate. Usually it's because they use the text to give feature in the bulletin. So the way to track whether they have kind of stuck around is whether they take the step to become a baptized member. They fill out a new member form that says, I've been baptized in whatever tradition that is, and I want to be a member. And that's kind of an outflow of the St. Margaret's Go class as a next step. And the other clear evidence that we are converting some newcomers to staying is found in the metric of new pledging units each stewardship cycle. And again, I don't have the exact number in front of me. I want to say it's at least a dozen. Maybe is it in the written report? The number of new pledging units. That includes, let's say someone who's been a member a long time, for whatever reason did not pledge in the calendar year, but has some history, and so they pledged again. The database we use can't kind of give you that. 14, so 14 new pledging units, which is great news, but also another element of the way that I would answer the question about whether that converts to helping us grow all of the metrics generally is that a lot of our not exclusively, but a lot of our newcomers represent the demographic of our neighborhood, which is 2/3 under 45. So a lot of people who are newer and are giving for the first time are not at the capacity of giving that others in later generation are giving. So we're doing the right thing by growing our giving units, but it's kind of like the pace at which we're able to attract who is in our mission field, which is our younger people. It doesn't quite, we have to catch up. Does that make sense? And some of our older members have either left or moved, or they have entered into eternal rest.
Thanks. I have a couple more. Also, I'd be curious are we going to get the slide deck?
Yes, absolutely.
You guys put a great work into it. I'd love to dig in more. Yeah, and then another thing I'd be interested in, and this might be a little gauche isn't the right word. This may not be a kind thing. This is not a nice way to put it, but I'd be curious to dig in some other things like the Legacy Society. I'd be curious about how much information you gather at the front about what kind of gifts people plan to make. Are they restricted or unrestricted? If they're declaring an amount or if they're just declaring that they've made a bequest of part of their society. I also don't, in trends, I'd be curious if that affected how dire our outlooks look at in the next, over a 10-year period or something. So that was part of my thing. And then, yeah, I'd just be curious about the slides and budget. But I agree. I think that the vestry has done their best with what's been given, and I'm excited about overcoming it. And Nellie and I were just chatting and thinking of already silly little ways that, we might contribute more, not like pledging, but that we could improve. So I appreciate the work.
Thank you, Daniel. I feel like that's a question for the leaders who discerned the creation of the 1894 Society, so I'll answer on their behalf. And if someone is in that category and wants to provide a different answer, by all means. We intentionally chose not to front-end asks for lots of details around what specifically is in people's plans. Anecdotally, some donors choose to make that known. I see Jane raising her hand, and she is a co-chair of the...
Hi, everyone. It's Jane Coink. I'm a co-chair. And the Legacy Society was our first year, so we sort of did a quiet ask. And it's really, as people are thinking of their end-of-life planning, it's a whole cycle of, your will and what gifts you want to give in your will. So I'm not particularly planning to die anytime soon, but I do have a will made. So, and lots of those people are have been in the parish a long time. So if you want more information, you can talk to me later.
And it's worth thanking publicly. Garrison alluded to the fact that another bequest had been received this month of January. It's from the estate of Carlin Rankin, and it was north of $100,000. And we miss her terribly. There are a lot of, off the top of my head, some parishioners have, enthusiastically made known the size of their bequest when it comes. We pray it's not anytime soon, but at least 2 of those bequests are in the ballpark of $1 million each. So another key difference by the fact that the endowment exists is that there's a policy in place that will control the ways in which these funds are spent in the future. And there have not been such strings attached to bequests in years past.
Sorry. One more question.
We love it.
Is that public, like what our spend policy is and what the draw policy is on the endowment?
It's certainly, it's certainly public and accessible. If anyone's interested in the legalese that created the endowment. Other questions? Daisy's just leaving, right? Not coming to the microphone. Thank you so much, Tim. Shall I call you Vanna? Please stand as you're able, and we will conclude this meeting. Oh, well, yes, I need to move that we adjourn this annual meeting. Thank you. Wave if you approve.
Names? Jessica. And Rich. Wait.
Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, ruler of all things in heaven and earth, hear our prayers for this parish family. Strengthen the faithful, arouse the careless, and restore the penitent. Grant us all things necessary for our common life, and bring us all to be of one heart and mind within your holy church, through Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. And thank you, Amy, for putting together the baskets with snacks, if there are more. I think so. Thank you, those online.